Hey, everybody. It's Heather, and it is Monday, and I'm glad to be here with you. So I hope you've had a good couple of weeks since we last connected, and I hope you enjoyed the writing prompts that I shared, and I hope that they have been beneficial for you because they are an essential part of learning how to really dive in to our emotional and spiritual and mental well-being, kind of going into our own iceberg, is really understanding that we are responsible for our feelings. We are responsible for what's going on in here. And the more we lean into that, the more we become aware that we can actually heal ourselves. Now, it's not easy. It's never easy. I've been in therapy for 20 years. And I can tell you that every time I think that something has healed, it will come back up again. It's like balls in a pool. When my children were little, they loved to play in our pool. And they had these little balls. And the ones that go in the ball pit, you know what I'm talking about? Well, they would try to push them down and they wouldn't stay down because they were filled with air. They're designed to float. And that's kind of like how it is with our stuff. It can feel like we're trying to keep all of those balls underneath the water line, but reality is we can't. And so they pop up at these random times, and it usually shows up in our behavior or a response or maybe a conversation or a conflict that are all normal parts of human experience. But when we begin to understand and tie together that there are other things underneath the waterline that are driving our behavior, then we can suddenly get control over our behavior. That's the beauty of recovery. That's the beauty of a 12-step system. That's why recovery programs that are 12-step based, like Alcoholics Anonymous, Codependents Anonymous, all of the fill in the blank anonymous, those support groups are so fabulous because it provides a structure that walks me through on a regular basis, um, what's required of me to show up for me and to take responsibility for me and be able to let go and learn how to detach in a loving way my loved ones. And let me tell you something, it's a journey, and some days I'm good at it and some days I'm not. I thought today we'd talk about relationships. So I am a relationship coach, as well as an emotional and spiritual health coach. So I do both. And I have a master's of divinity, and I have had so much training in relationship therapy and coaching. And one of the things I think I see the most is how our pain and wounding shows up in our relationships, specifically in how we want to connect with people. But sometimes, because of our experiences in the past, because of our wounding, because of our pain that, again, we have carried with us all of our life, these experiences inform how we show up in our relationships. And so we can really long for a relationship, long for intimacy. But then when it happens, it can feel very scary, very vulnerable. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about that today. So let's take a look. So this is a really important quote that I want to leave on the screen for a second, because I think it's important. So longing is a part of you asking to be seen, heard, and healed. So longing is one of those important emotions, sensations. We know when we are longing for something. Longings tell us, gives us information. It tells us important things that we need to pause and consider. When I am longing for something, that is way more than just wanting something or an impulse. A longing is that deep down in the marrow kind of desire and hope. And there's a lot of language tied up in longing. But when you're longing for intimacy and connection, and yet it feels too close, too vulnerable, there's something inside of us, inside of me. It's a part of me that I've carried with me forever and will forever. But it is asking to be seen, heard, and healed. The healing can't come until we acknowledge it, until we see it. And the healing can't come until we listen to that part of ourselves that has been wounded or hurt. And that's where the power of this comes in, the iceberg. And this is an activity that is so important. I'm going to keep coming back to it again and again and again. In fact, I've made the iceberg kind of part of my logo now because it's something that I keep referring to on a regular basis because it's so essential to understanding self-awareness and self-growth and personal development and emotional health and spiritual health and all of the things that come with trying to be a human on this planet, right? So there are times when the things beneath the waterline inform why we long for something, why we desire something. So when we're talking about relationships, we long for that intimacy because we were designed for intimacy. We were designed for connection. Humans were created to be in community and in connection. Then there is pain experienced when there's a disconnection. And I'm going to go into that probably in a couple of weeks. I've talked about it before in the past, probably a couple of years ago, but I'm going to bring it back up, kind of freshen it up a little bit because it talks about in a visual way what can cause disconnection in a relationship. But when we're longing for intimacy and we feel like it's too much in the moment, or we feel like we're too vulnerable, we're too raw, it's often because we have had an experience in the past where we were wounded in connection. So disconnection is safer. So there's a part of our body that wants to be safe from the danger of being hurt in connection. Often this happened in our earliest relationships and our most formative relationships with our caregivers. It doesn't have to be a mom or a dad. It could be a grandparent, uncle, aunt, whoever was that key person in your life when you were growing up that you kind of modeled after how they modeled human connection. And unfortunately, because we're human, there's going to be a certain level of dysfunction with regard to how. And dysfunction is one of those words where it's like, it's not a bad word, and I think we use it like a bad word, but dysfunction means that it's not properly functioning. So there are family dynamics and relationship dynamics, and there's really phenomenal theories on family dynamics, and there's phenomenal theories and research even talking about parts therapy, where there's parts of us that deserve to be acknowledged, seen, heard in order to be healed. So there's a lot to that. I don't want to overwhelm you, but the fact of the matter is that it's normal to long for intimacy and connection because we're designed for it. We're made for it. However, it is also normal to suddenly, when that intimacy encroaches upon that safe area, that there's a part of you and a part of me that might want to defend us or protect us from that thing we long for because of previous pain. Hopefully that makes some sense. So here's some things I thought would be helpful. So I've talked about the iceberg, and then we're like, okay, well, what do we do to change? How do we learn to see our behavior, acknowledge the pain? So here's some essentials to making a change, and hopefully this is going to translate well. So in relationships, in our behavior, we want to make a change. What are kind of the key strategies? For me, this works with my clients, and it's something that it's simple because it's a quadrant, it's 4 steps, it's kind of a framework. So the essentials of making a change is counting the wins, right? Being able to say how I showed up for myself today. I took time for myself. I exercised. I drank 5 glasses of water. You count those little tiny wins, and that really helps you build up your confidence and your autonomy. I've talked about autonomy before. Autonomy is really, really, really important. And the only way we begin to feel confident in our ability to take care of ourselves is to count the wins, to recognize the work we've been doing and recognize those tiny little micro wins. These aren't big wins, these are little micro wins. The next thing is coming to terms with the story I tell myself. So we need to be able to reframe the story I tell myself about me. Am I a strong person? Am I capable? Or do I feel like a victim? Or do I feel like everything goes wrong for me? So there's a story that we tell ourselves that we need to learn to reframe. And that is even a process in itself that I walk my clients through because it does take a little bit of time. However, it's important to think about the story I tell myself in order to understand how to make a change. I need to really tune in and listen to myself and listen to the story I tell myself about a situation that's happening. And usually it's an ouchy, hard, emotionally charged situation. That's going to be kind of your cue to listen into the story you tell yourself. Then it's reflecting on next steps. So reflecting on next steps is like one of those things that we don't do enough of. And I would be in line of who doesn't reflect enough. I think I am a very driven person. I'm a helper. I like helping other people, but I don't always help myself with regard to reflection. And reflection is critical, 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 critical to change. And so this is an area I constantly work on, and I work through the writing prompts that I share with you guys on the regular basis. So reflect on next steps. And then the fourth quadrant is dream of what is to come. So much of the time we reflect and we just sit in that reflection, and maybe something comes up and it's a hard emotion and we don't really know how to move on. We feel stuck. So recognizing that there's an emotional roadmap that you can use to be able to feel the feelings, understand where they're coming from, understand what's driving it, acknowledge the feelings and emotions, and then allow them to move by so that you can open up yourself to imagination and play. Creativity, play, and imagination, we're finding out in research, is actually the powerhouse of personal health and well-being. When we are creative and imaginative and playful, we are healthier. And that's just what we're finding out. So these are kind of four things, right? So counting the wins, understanding the story I tell myself, particularly in hard, ouchy, difficult situation, reflecting on what I see about myself and also on what I want to do next, and then allowing space for play and imagination and dreaming. Here today, I want to focus on the story I tell myself. So, understanding that the story I tell myself in relationship with another person where I am longing for intimacy, when I'm longing for it, what's the story about that? Why am I longing for that intimacy? The story I tell myself about intimacy, maybe if someone, I don't feel that warm fuzzy, and so I need connection in order to feel that warm fuzzy. Or I need connection and that intimacy to feel good about myself. Or I need that intimacy to know that I'm loved. The story I tell myself about intimacy is that if someone doesn't want to be intimate with me, then I am not worthy. So there's a lot of stories that can go with that, okay? And there's a whole exercise that I walk people through to help identify those, right? To help kind of you discover, because every story is unique and there's no wrong answer here. However, it is really critical to understanding when we want intimacy with our person, a partner, a friend, a family member, a romantic partner. It doesn't always have to be romantic. Intimacy is not just romantic. So that mutual reciprocal connection of intimacy, of being able to share information with one another, is the marker of true, authentic intimacy, and we all long for it. But when we feel that, we're intimate, it feels too close, feels too vulnerable, what do I tell myself about that part? The story I tell myself is that I really long for intimacy and I want it, but I'm scared of it, so it's just easier to not be in relationship. right? That's a common one that I hear. It's easier for me to just let it go. It's easier for me to be alone than experience that intimacy because I'm afraid to be wounded. And then you can even take it to a story of every time I'm in a relationship, I'm hurt. So therefore, I will put my armor up and not be intimate, not be authentic, right? So these are all normal parts of what comes up, again, related to what's beneath our waterline and our iceberg and understanding, what's driving that? What experience in the past is informing that story I tell myself, okay? And that's where we talk about reflection. But I want to talk about the brain real quick because I think this is really important with regard to how we approach the story I tell myself, because the story I tell myself always kind of starts here. And this is where I think we need to remember that what I think informs what I feel. And what I feel will show up in my body, and then it'll show up in my behavior. So my thinking actually can impact what I'm feeling, and then what I feel in my body, and then show up in what I physically do in behavior. That's the top of the iceberg. So what I feel and what I feel in my body, those two bottom quadrants, are the essential parts to understanding how change works. But the story I tell myself says, hey, what I think is, I think I don't deserve to have someone want to be intimate with me. What I feel about that, well, I feel sad about that. And I feel in my body, I feel nauseous and I feel hot and I feel icky. So what I do is I just withdraw because it's too hard to even think about intimacy. So I might as well not be in a relationship. That's an example. And again, there are many billions of variations of how the story I tell myself works. But it really starts with the brain. And I think I want to talk about the brain in this kind of simplistic way. So the big part of our brain is the thinking brain. Okay, so the thinking brain. And then there is the emotional brain, which is the limbic system. It's the red area. And then the reptilian brain. So the part of our brain that's the oldest is the reptilian brain. That part of our brain is a bazillion years old. I'm not a research scientist, but it's the oldest part of our brain. And in dangerous situations, it is always activated first. It is always activated first because it's like a constant radar. Our body is like is an antenna for this kind of stuff. So let's take a look really specifically, and I recommend you pause the video or sit on this slide and really look at the words that I've written out there for each parts of the brain. So I want you to see in the reptilian brain, I have survival, the body, temperature, breathing, reflex, fight, flight, or freeze. Those are probably words you're familiar with that you've heard. That is all part of the reptilian brain. The red part of the brain, which is the emotional brain, that is where connection, moods, habits, hormones, bonding, connection, right? That's what we're looking for. And this is the emotional part of the brain, okay? So first of all, you can see that the reptilian brain and the emotional brain are really connected, but it seems like the reptilian brain is more about like myself, whereas the emotional brain's about how I connect with other, how I connect even with myself or in social situations. So our emotional health is never just about us. It is always impacting everybody else around us. And it's also a lot where we hold a lot of memory. So your memory, your emotional memory, all the things beneath your iceberg from your life experiences are deeply connected to the reptilian brain and impacts, hey, how you react to a situation or memory that brings up all those emotional memories and triggers your reptilian brain, okay? Now, the big part of our brain, and there's a lot of our brain that, you know, guys, you can listen to podcasts that have some wonderful resources. I mean, there's a bazillion resources about the brain and how much we know about the brain and how much we don't know about the brain and how much we're still learning about the brain. But you can see here in the frontal lobe, the green part, that is where we have planning, logic, problem solving, creativity, okay, self control. So that's our executive functioning. So when a tough situation happens, scary, hard, the oldest part of our brain reacts first. Then the emotional brain will come online to inform what the reptilian brain is saying is dangerous, bad, scary, awful, raging fire. So imagine you are in a situation, you feel all of a sudden in your body, your breathing comes up, your temperature's up, you're not really sure what's going on. And then there's the emotion that comes up and you recognize, what do I feel? So that's why I always talk about what do you feel and what are the emotions coming up and what are you feeling in your body, because they're married, they're always connected. So that memory is going to keep you into that place of danger. You're going to feel very scared. These are the very first moments that are like, feel like you're like super slow. It feels like super long that you're in this really upset place, really hard, emotionally charged place, and you're physically feeling like you're in danger. When you slow down enough, it allows the frontal lobe, the green part of our brain, to be able to come online. And when that begins to come online, we can get clarity. That's where abstract thought comes in. That's where attention comes in, and even language. So one of the ways that we can be able to access our emotional memory and that emotional brain without triggering kind of our guardian, which is our reptilian brain that wants to protect us and keep us safe, is learning how to talk, add language to what we're feeling. And that's why I always talk about using a feeling wheel, seeing the words on the feeling wheel. There's something powerful about a feeling wheel that helps you see that's the emotion, because it's so hard when you're in the midst of that kind of fight or flight mode where the reptilian brain is activated because of some emotional memory, right? Because there's a longing for connection, but there's pain associated with it. So it feels really, really super scary. Okay, so here's some things that are critical when we're thinking about the brain. When we're using an emotional roadmap because we're feeling a situation and we don't know what to do next, we feel overwhelmed, we feel stressed, we feel anxious, we're scared, we're fearful. The first question you want to ask yourself is, am I safe? That's the question that's happening in the reptilian brain. Am I safe? Period. Has nothing to do with anything else. It just needs to know, am I safe? So that's it, what it's asking, am I safe? So you want to always be able to create a story around the fact that I am safe, I am able to be here for myself. And then am I loved? So that's where that's the big question the emotional brain is asking. Am I loved? Do I love myself? Do I feel love from people around me? Do I feel that connection? Am I loved? And that is a huge question. We're not going to be able to deep dive that today, but it's a big one. And then the big part of our brain with the frontal lobe and the rest of our brain is, what can I learn from this? That's where we can take the information and reflect, okay? So the writing prompts that we talk about today, here in just a second, is really helping us deep dive into what was the situation where I felt unsafe. I have an emotional memory tied to that where I did not feel loved. I did not feel connection. And now in my adult life, I want to be loved, but I'm not sure if I feel safe because there was a memory in my past where I was hurt. And so I will guard myself. I will protect myself. I will not be in relationship. So the goal is to be able to work your way up from, am I safe? Yes, I'm safe. I'm an adult. I can take care of myself. Am I loved? I love me. I love me. That's where you start. I love me. Regardless of who else loves me, I love me. And I'm going to be able to show up for me. And I'm going to feel connected in myself as I learn to be in connection with others. But I need to be able to feel connected to myself and connected to the other parts of me that might feel a little bit like aliens. You know, you kind of feel like there's a part of me that kind of is different than the person I want to be. It's not the best version of me. And then what can I learn from this is after reflection, right? And then the dreaming. So remember, the key things of change is counting the wins. Is am I safe? Am I safe is a win for am I safe is when I felt really scared in a situation, in a relationship, and a conflict at work, with my partner. What did I do to help myself feel safe? Number one. And what did I do to help myself feel loved by me? Then I'm able to really access and allow reflection to occur. Okay, so when you long for intimacy in relationships, but it feels too close or vulnerable, writing prompts, this is part one. Okay, so a recent situation when I longed for intimacy but felt too close or vulnerable was, you're going to fill in the blank there, okay? And you go with what comes first. In this situation, I felt, so I'm going to recommend you have a feeling wheel. Google feeling wheel, you'll be able to find it. And just simply recall the situation, allow it to come up, and write down what comes first. In this situation, I felt. And it's really important to choose a recent one because it's easy for us to lose memory. We will not remember situations. So in this situation, I felt, recent situation, the feelings reminded me of. Go with it. Trust what comes up. Recalling that, I think I needed, take time with this one. I think I needed, but I didn't get it. I didn't get what I needed. So again, trust what comes up. It makes sense that I did that because this is your opportunity to allow yourself to see what you experienced, acknowledge it, and validate it. That's like being seen and heard. You're hearing, you're listening to the emotion, you're listening to that part of yourself that has something to say about a situation that occurred, and you're validating it. And you're going to feel that in your body, by the way. So then there's part two of the writing prompts. So the story that I tell myself about intimacy feeling too close or vulnerable is, sit with this one for a while, but trust what comes up. The truth is, this is where you're reframing the story you tell yourself. Because oftentimes the story we tell ourselves is not true because it's kind of made up. Our brain is trying to help us stay safe, right? But we're going to say the truth is, this is the story I tell myself about this. The truth is, and then knowing this, I can try to reframe this story by, this is where you're really going into that part of your brain where, okay, I'm aware that I feel this and this situation reminded me of it. So now I can try to reframe that story of wanting to be in intimacy with someone, but I feel so vulnerable, it feels too scary. How can I reframe this story? If I do this, I may be more able to. Again, this is allowing yourself to dream of what's to come, right? To dream, to be curious about, if I reframe this story, I may be more able to be in a relationship. I may be more able to reach out and connect with my parents or a sibling or an old friend that maybe there was a situation. You never know. But this is allowing yourself to think curiously and playfully and kind of dreaming just a little bit. In this work, I'm learning that some of the stories I tell myself are, just say it, whatever it is in this work, you're reflecting here. And one way I will show up for myself now is this is how to help you answer the question of, am I loved and am I safe? Those two questions are important and they're integral to relationships with yourself and with all the people you want to be in relationship with. So just one way I will show up for myself now. Okay, so that's really it, y'all. And I hope that's been helpful information. I hope this is something that you can benefit from. Always feel free to reach out to me at letsfeelgoodnow.com. Happy to be of support. And this live video will drop on my podcast on Wednesday morning. And I will make sure I post the writing prompts and all the places on my Instagram and Facebook. If you want to follow me, you can find me at letsfeelgoodnow.com and all the places that I post this information. Have a great week. I will talk to you soon. Bye, y'all.